Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. This is layer 8, Sarge, and as previously mentioned in my last video, I was going to do a quick rundown on the eCPPT exam by INE Security. I recently took this exam. In October and passed. Got my results around November, and I kind of wanted to give a breakdown really of how it went, how I feel about the exam, how I feel it compares. As I previously had done the EJPT, and I'm currently doing the OSCP, so this one kind of made sense to do a quick review on how it went, to hopefully help other people that are navigating their way through the exam or the coursework. So a brief overview is, as you can see on here, this is the Security INE website, or INE Security website, which details the certification. This is unlike the EJPT. If you've taken that, it's not multiple choice questions, which the EJPT kind of stands itself on. It is as hands-on, it's on, if not more hands-on, and a little bit more advanced in what you need to do in the actual exam. But it also finishes off the exam with a professionally graded, as it's written there, commercially graded penetration testing report. So if your report writing skills or note-taking skills are not as good, then this is the exam where you have to bring that up. As was I. I mean, let's refer back to DJPT. It is a multi-choice question, a multiple choice exam. You attack a network and you answer questions based around that network. This is not like that. This is, you're given a network, you're given access in some form, and then you're told to make your way through the network. The end game of that exam is that you compromise all machines and write a report about what you find and detailed screenshots and how the examiner could replicate and be notified of vulnerabilities. Not all vulnerabilities or could be exploited, but they still need to be noted. And each step that you took in certain stages needs to be documented as well. So there's a lot to take in, especially if it's your first, as it was for me, more advanced exam compared to the EJPT. Or just written exams, not written, but other multiple choice exams that I've done, where it's just been, here's an hour, here's 80 questions, answer them. This was very hands-on. This was, although you had a couple of weeks to do it, it's very, it's a long, drawn-out exam, which, it can take its toll, and you kind of need to manage yourself, manage how you act, how you sleep, how you eat, stuff like that. So you're not kind of in and out within an afternoon. You're set in for the long run really for this. So but I think that's where it has its merit. I think it engages in almost a real life scenario. So engagements would be lasting a week, maybe more, and report writing would be important at the end of it. So as it goes as a certification, it provides a good understanding, and it's definitely provided me with the confidence to know that I can complete an engagement and write a report at the end of it. So as you see here, this is probably the key part here. The exam itself is going to be testing the following areas. Methodologies against Windows and Linux, obviously quite important. Vulnerability assessment of networks, web applications. This is where you need to understand that you're not going to be able to exploit everything, but to be able to know everything on the machines is equally as important. It needs to be, if you're going to provide this to a client, they yes, they need to know where things can be exploited, but they also need to know where vulnerabilities lay. It's just as important in most auditing and reviews. Yes, you tell them the bad, but also tell them the stuff that potentially could be down the line, or if it's not fixed, as soon as possible, there's a potential it could also raise it. So within that, you kind of work off the severity of each vulnerability you find. Not all things are critical. High, yes, is also quite important, but the medium, lows, and also information is going to be the next thing. So what I'll do is I'll provide a show template of, there's a few out there, they're fairly generic, of how you gauge these vulnerabilities. They're very well-known severities out there. So if you're unsure, where does this vulnerability I found lay, chances are there's a spectrum somewhere to show what that would be covered under. Especially if it has a CVE against it, it would already tell you its severity. So you kind of just put two and two together, work it out, and you mark that within the report. Although this isn't a critical vulnerability, your banner header is showing the application version that that's, it's not critical, but it's definitely of low, maybe informational purposes, that the data exposure there. So you kind of have to gauge those things, but provide your own input and recommendations within the report. So advanced exploitation with Metasploit. Knowing Metasploit is very key. There's no restrictions on how much you can use it in this exam, but it's worth noting how to use it. How, not just the search for an exploit, fill in the information, the options, and then run. You need to understand what it's doing, and also what to do post exploitation as well. It will come in very handy to know what Metasploit can do inside a shell. So you can background shells and then continue to use Metasploit to search and continue with post exploitation, and equally with pivoting as well. So there's a number of pivoting options out there. As it says there, perform attacks in pivoting. Metasploit was great in my opinion for me. You may choose other options. There are other options out there. SOCAT, Chisel. I went down the proxy chains route, and there is a number of resources out there that can help you, decide on that at the time, and whatever works best for you. Proxy chains was my go-to. I committed myself to it. I recommend you do that as well as there's a couple out there and there's different ways of how they work, but I think if you choose one, really understand what it's doing, understand what you're trying to do with it, and how you'll use it within the network. That's also equally as important. How a network works when you are trying to pivot, that is equally as important. And there's a couple of resources out there that can provide that information. That can be quite frustrating if you get stuck on that. So I highly recommend. I studied that side of things because I'd seen reviews where people had said, pivoting is absolutely crucial within this exam. I felt it was a bit of a weakness for myself, so I studied as much as possible, and I still in the exam, had to stop and think about what I was doing to make sure that I was understanding what I was trying to do in that scenario. So you may understand it and you may understand how it works, but when it comes to the actual time of the exam, you spend a long time exploiting, moving, through machines. It's absolutely bound to happen where you'll suddenly become maybe confused, or just a bit hazy on where you are at the time. I know I definitely did. I left myself. I thought, okay, I've had enough now. I need a break because things aren't just going together. Um, go away, eat, relax, come back, and things are usually a bit clearer. And with that, it also allows you to kind of think, what am I trying to do here? What am I trying to achieve? I need to get from here to here. Why is it not working? What am I not seeing? What am I not understanding? And go at that, instead of becoming so frustrated that you end up sitting there banging your head against the desk, which I definitely did. I found the latter to not work so well. So absolutely key. There's lots out there. There's lots of documentation on pivoting. Choose a method, and just understand what you're trying to do. Web application manual exploitation, it's a pretty standard one. The eJPT covered a few of those things, but there are tools out there that can help you with that. Absolutely. There's a few. Zap was my key one. It's a great one for information gathering and can kind of help you, get an idea where things are. But you also need to understand the manual side of things, understand cross-site scripting and how to test for it. Also SQL injection, understand how to test for it. Those basic ones, and understand just what tool to use at the right time, and what you're looking for, really. Information gathering and reconnaissance is, it's a given. That's almost the key part here is enumeration, and I think that kind of falls under it, where the more information you have, the better. Scanning and profiling target, I feel, comes under that. You're not sure what you're actually attacking until you really understand what it is. So yeah, I think that falls under enumeration still. As everyone says, enumerate. I find myself, I become a little bit disorientated with, I could just attack one thing, keep going, but I'm not finding anything. Usually I step back and say, okay, well, what else is there? Did I actually find everything that's available? And if I go backwards a couple of steps, start my enumeration again, there's a high chance I'm going to find something else that I just missed. Even my ports, I didn't scan enough ports. I didn't, I wasn't checking versions correctly. There's a few things, and it's always worth going back. Just take time and go back and think, right, well, did I cover everything here? Privilege escalation, persistence. You're going to need to know. Obviously, privilege escalation is given if you want to actually, completely take over a box. But the persistent side of things is something that you need to understand. Especially when you're moving through a network, you're in there for quite some time. You're obviously pivoting where you can. The persistent side of things is important because there could be a point where you may lose connection to certain things and you have to start again. So finding that persistence, finding that point where you say, okay, I'm going to stay, I should be safe to hold on here while I continue my enumeration, because you don't want every time you gain a foothold to then lose it. You kind of want to be able to gain that foothold, know that you can stay there and continue enumeration and move through the network. And that could be 1 or 2, 3 or 4 or 5 steps into the network. You need to understand that you're still safe to hold that position while you continue enumerating and then further attacking the network. It can be frustrating when you lose a shell, absolutely. But to understand how to get that shell back and to secure it in a way that you can stay within that network is going to help. It's going to save you a lot of time. The exploit development side of things. So this next one, there is a buffer overflow section within the course. It's definitely worth understanding how a buffer overflow works. There is also a number of resources out there. I'll put the links below. Tiberius does a really good breakdown on a try hack me box for a buffer overflow. I absolutely recommend that you watch it as many times as possible until it sticks. I also recommend that you create a lab for yourself, create a basic Windows machine, and use that as I tried to do this as a personal machine. So Immunity Debugger is an application that can be used for exploit development. It works great, but separate from your own network. Put yourself in another VM. It's easier. It's better to run. Most of these things, for you to really exploit an application, you need most of the firewall settings and everything to be turned off. It just stops everything working. You don't want your AV and your firewall settings to restrict you trying to crack into an application. So create your own VM, segregate from everything, turn everything off, and use that. Move the exe, the application you're trying to exploit for the buffer overflow, into that VM, and work just solely inside there. Once you need to then connect it back to the machine you're trying to exploit, create an internal network that can be segregated, so you open it up to the internet, and use a Unity debugger to understand what you're doing to the application. You need to gain a good understanding of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and also documenting what you're doing. That's a very important key here, is that when you come in to do these reports and exploiting these machines, documenting everything. And if you're studying to do a buffer overflow, you understand there's multiple steps, there's multiple points within that exploitation that you need to document. You need to show what you're doing, how you've done it, how you've gained, how you've gathered that information, and then exploit it. So to be honest, I got to the point where I was able to do a buffer overflow extremely quickly because the steps were just the same every time. Even if there was a slight deviation from what I was doing, I knew what I was looking for. So get to that point if you can, because it's definitely going to help. I had to replicate that a few times due to just not having enough information. I lost the shell. There's a number of things. There's a number of reasons. The next day, your VPN may not work. You may just need to start again almost. So get to the point where a buffer overflow is not as scary as it looks. And the last thing, report writing skills and remediations. This is definitely the encompassing thing here. You need to be able to write a report. So there are reviews out there and there are templates. There's a number of ways to do this. You can either write the report as you go. It is possible. I mean, note taking is key, and it is possible to take notes, take screenshots as you go. That's absolutely imperative. To write the actual report itself, I definitely couldn't do that. I was able to take notes, take screenshots. I also screen recorded my one monitor that had the main show of what I was doing, and I referred back to that if I needed to. I mean, I left it recording for most of the day using OBS, and then saved it, said, right, that's day 2, that's day 3, that's day 4. And if I really needed to, and I did at one point, had to go back because I thought I haven't taken enough screenshots, or what did I do? What was the final steps I did last night? So I quickly reviewed the footage. It's very long, it's very, laborious, but it was there just in case. I mean, my notes may have stopped being taken. I may have dropped off my notes because I was concentrating on something, but the screen recording was still going. So, I was able to go back and refer to that and say, okay, that was the last thing I did. Great, before I turned everything off. And there's no harm. I mean, it takes up a bit of room. There could be quite large files in some cases, but there's no harm in just, putting a folder to the side and saying, just dump all my day's work into here, just in case. And also, if you find that you haven't taken a screenshot, you can go back and screenshot the screen recording. It's not the greatest quality in some cases, but it could help you get that screenshot that you maybe forgot to take at the time. So that's just a tip. I found it useful. So one of the resources I mentioned was a buffer overflow room, buffer overflow prep room within TryHackMe. This become a very, very good place for me to sort of hone my skill around buffer overflows. It's quite a daunting prospect in some cases. System architecture and stuff like that is a little bit to get your head around. But I feel once you have it and once you understand what you're doing, you just need to have it focused in on what you need to do to exploit that application. So this room helped me massively. I also followed along through this room. The guide in just this room without a write-up is brilliant. The setting up of the fuzzing and the exploit and crashing the application, it's all here, and you can take this information and scope it to your own needs. Use it exactly as it is and understand that way, or if you've already noticed or this method anyway, just run through it, because I hold a lot to this application, this room, for allowing me to get past the buffer overflow section quite easily. So it's all great stuff, but if you do like to have a kind of a follow along video, I recommend Tiberius stack-based buffer overflow prep. The name is slightly different. I believe he does mention that in the video. He changed the name slightly for some reason, but it's the same. It's the same room, and he walks through the whole thing, more or less as it's written here, and it's a great resource. It's definitely worth looking at. Another good resource, this was recommended through another review and another blog post I read, was this aspect of double pivoting. I mentioned earlier, pivoting is quite a key aspect in this course, in this exam. This definitely is a way of helping. There's a few different things out there, a few rooms, a few different labs, but blog posts like this, read them, make sure you understand it, and follow along to anything they're trying to provide here. If you can set up your own lab to test this, as I mentioned earlier, if you set up your own lab to do the buffer overflow, there's no harm in saying that you could then use another couple of machines set up in that lab to test your pivoting skills. It will definitely save you having to work it out on the spot when it comes to the exam. There's obviously a lot of time in these exams, but if you don't go in there with a kind of a general understanding of it, you're going to probably waste some valuable time having to go back and study to try and catch up. So I'd like to think I did enough before I went in there. I still got stuck, and I still had to come back and think, right, something's not working. What do I need to do? This explains how to do it through Metasploit, from Interpreter, which is what I used. It's great. It's just it's a very easy way to review everything and set it up. So, but it might not work for you. So yeah, review these, take in as much as possible, and hopefully give yourself a fighting chance to get your head around these bits when it comes up in the exam. So that was the sort of an overview of my experience with the eCPPT exam. Also, a couple of resources at the end there. I hope they're beneficial in some way. Just it's one things I found as I was looking at these reviews while I was studying for this exam. It's in my own opinion, it's a great exam. It's given me a lot of confidence to be able to move into the next courses and next exams. It was a great feeling when I got the the nod to say I passed. The exam feedback I got as well was great, and it's just allowed me to know that I know that I'm taking it in. Is probably the best way to explain it. You study so much and you get pass these exams, but you go on for some time where you continue studying. Sometimes it just can feel like am I really picking this up? And so to take an exam that is deemed as advanced as the eCPPT has definitely helped me with confidence to move into the next. So, as I mentioned, I am now doing the Pen 200, and I don't think I would have taken it the other way around. It was definitely I felt like I'll do this one first, concentrate on that, and then move into the main one, the OSCP. So, it's definitely given me the the go to move on to the next. So if you are considering it, we're in the middle of it, to keep going, go for it. It will show you how through the course how to work with the most key points of doing a penetration test, and also it'll allow you to have that experience as well of that time limit of 2 weeks to be able to finish that report. The lab time finishes after 7 days. Then you have to write a report. There is a time scale. And it's long enough for you to have to work towards that. So, in my opinion, great exam, a great time, and I learned a lot about myself and my note taking ability and report writing skills. So, yeah, I appreciate you watching. Like I said, if you ever have any questions, I'll be doing another one. Follow up with EJPT at some point, and also following on more with the OSCP. So if there's any queries, questions, like and subscribe and all that stuff. And yeah, I appreciate you watching, and I hope this has helped in some way. So thanks. Speak soon.